ChessDiagnostic.
Hello everybody and welcome back for another video. We're going to be on position 26 today of the complete chess endgame course, going back to the rook endings, and obviously this is not the position, but I just want to show a position from a game that I played recently as a blitz game that just resulted in a drawn ending. And now you can see here, objectively white should be better, but practically it's a little harder for white to play in this position because you can see I've been attacking. We both have some weaknesses, and I'm about to win a pawn here after I take bishop, and then I take with the rook. Now, you can see that there's some chances for both sides, and that we still have the two rooks on the game. Now, part of the reason that rook endgames are so common is that they're really the last developed piece, and you'll see the minor pieces and queens come off pretty quickly if things peter out from a relatively complicated position. All right, so after a few moves, good move protecting the f5 pawn, I come back to threaten it further. Now, white could have probably won here with knight to g4, but it's a blitz game, we were playing fast, and those kind of moves are sometimes hard to find because it would have dropped the f5 pawn, but he could have took here with check. But let's see what happens. So he misses that, and you'll see players do this a lot. This player's rated 2050, so not a weak player, but just decides to trade queens after giving up a pawn. And it goes back to a roughly equal position. I have this weak d5 backwards pawn, but white also has some problems with the pin on this knight. So after some trades, you can see that after rooks come off, he takes. And now after these moves, with b6, it's a totally equal rook endgame. I'd say a practical ending, and this should be a draw. I ended up winning it after some just tactical errors, but you can see that you need to be careful to know the ending positions that you want to go for. All right, so let's get into position 26, and here we are. All right, let's go back. There. So this is a position. I'm going to start as white first from the white side just to show. If you want to pause the video, I would encourage you to try to analyze this. Now this should be a really well-known position to stronger players. If you've never seen this position, then you should get very familiar with it because this happens a lot. Now white obviously has one extra pawn, but he's in front of the pawn on the rook file, and black would take it if the white rook moves at any time, but there's a trick. Now notice that the black king is on the 7th rank, very dangerous, but if he was further up, it would actually be even worse because then white could just check at any time, giving him time to remove the rook and then queen. But in this position with the 7th rank, if black doesn't get here, the reason that that's a huge issue is that now white can play rook to h8, and if black takes, because white's threatening to queen, then we see a skewer. Now the king moves and we win the rook. So I'll just go through real quickly just how to mate, my method of mating in this position. I don't think I went through that before. So I just use basically what's called tightening the box method that I've heard about somewhere. I can't remember where. But basically you just create a smaller box for the king. There's probably easier ways, but I just find that that's the easiest way to make very quick moves. So if black tries to stay in the center, I'll just check and then see which side he goes to. And now you see that with the king, there's this box created by the rook that the king could never exit. And with the king's help, then the box gets smaller and smaller. So now I move the rook over and create an even smaller box, just tightening the box. And with the king's help, we create a smaller box. Now here, and then if he does something like that, just make it smaller. Bring the king over, and then you could check. Now if black goes here, then you just make a waiting move so that he has to step in front of your king, and then you can mate very quickly. And if he tries to play something like, let's say king to c1, then you just bring the king over, check, and then you can make another waiting move. And normally with this method, you can mate in a couple seconds if you have to. So I just wanted to cover that, at least during this course. All right, so let's go back to the black side of this position. So if you want to try to figure out how black would play, I would encourage you to do that at this point. Now, as black, this is actually a draw if black makes the correct move and it's black to move. And there's one method that white needs to keep in mind, and there's one method that black needs to keep in mind. Well, actually two. So black would first probably want to get to G7. For some reason, the computer says to give some checks, but I just kind of edited it. So at this point, black would play king to G7. Now the king is in a good place because now the rook to H8 trick doesn't work, and if the white moves the rook anywhere else, then once black takes, there's no skewer at all because he can't check. So for example, if white moves here, just take, and now the rook would take. So he can't cause a skewer on H7. All right, so let's go back here. Now, as white, if black plays king to G7, the only method that white has to try is to try to get his king over, protect this pawn, and then get the rook out. Now, attacking this rook doesn't work because black could just simply shuffle the rook back here or just give checks to the king if he gets further enough away. So bring the rook back. Now, for black, the two methods that you need to keep in mind are first preventing the skewer, and the second is to always keep the rook on this pawn so that if the rook moves, you'll be able to take it, or check the king to drive it further away from protection of this pawn. So let's see how black does that. Check. All right, so this move protecting or threatening the pawn, I guess you could say. Now, if white comes again, you just check. And you see that all these checks, it's rather annoying, but white cannot get or cannot escape or oppose these black rook checks. And they're essential if you want to claim, I guess, either the 50 move or just agree to a draw at this point. So black could just check the king forever, and if white tries to come and attack the rook, you just move the rook back and forth. If white comes back, then you just keep checking the king until he gives up and agrees to a draw. All right, so this, I would say, is a very important practical and theoretical endgame that you'll meet in practical play a lot, and I would encourage you to study it and play it against the computer. I'll go back to the initial position if you want to set it up. Do it as both black and white. White's pretty easy, but especially as black so that you'll be able to not lose at least this ending if you get it. All right, thanks for watching. We're on position 26, and I'll be putting out position 27 hopefully sometime in the next couple of days too. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the future.